We ran up to the top of the platform, and I could see him in a group of people sitting on a bench, quickly trying to remove the hoodie that he was wearing, trying to conceal perhaps his identity, because he knew that I'd seen him earlier. I walk up to him, and I'm about perhaps 15 feet away or so, and he stands up from the crowd, and he pulls a handgun out from behind his back, points it at me, and starts firing rounds.
Bend, don't break. This is a Delta Police podcast.
Hear more about how police officers strengthen their resiliency through the power of story.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to episode number 66 of the Bend, Don't Break podcast. Today I have with me Constable Josh Harms, who was way back on August the 12th of 2020, part of episode number 20 of Bend, Don't Break. And at that particular time, he was still a member of the Metro Vancouver Transit Police, but since then he has joined the Delta Police, and we're proud to have him as a serving member, serving this wonderful community of Delta here. And the reason Josh is on is that on January 30th, 2019, Josh was working on the platform, the train platform, the SkyTrain platform of Surrey, when a man by the name of Deon Gordon Glasgow ended up pulling out a handgun and shooting Josh. And as a result, Josh was critically hurt and received some treatment at the Royal Columbian Hospital before he came back to work in a short period of time, already by May, and he was already back to work for the Metro Vancouver Transit Police. So it was an amazing story. But Josh was on episode number 20, as I mentioned, on August 12th, 2020. And at that particular time, Josh wasn't able to go into all the details. And this is a fascinating story of someone who was significantly hurt and then being able to come back and is now fully resilient and can talk a little bit more about his story. So just a little bit further information on this. On March the 17th, 2021, Mr. Glasgow was convicted and at that particular time received a 10-year sentence behind bars for the shooting of Constable Josh Harms. So a significant sentence. And Josh, with that, welcome to the Bend, Don't Break podcast.
Thanks so much, Chief, for having me a second time, agreeing to meet again.
Yeah, I think your story is amazing. And I think the people that listen to our podcast and view our podcast on YouTube will be amazed at how well you have done since that time and sort of how your career has taken off and some of the things that you did as well. So maybe, Josh, tell us a little bit about just currently where you're working, and then I want to go back and bring you back into January of 2019.
Sure. For the last 3 years, I've been with Delta Police. This is my home community, so it's the department that I was really passionate about trying to work for. I did about a year and a half with the South Patrol team working in Ladner and Tawasin, and for another last year and a half, I've been on our Tawasin First Nation service team. And so I kind of stand on the shoulders of giants on that team. The relationship building that's happened with our TFN community has been really special, really amazing. And it's a really awesome role to have right now, where we get to work closely with it's a unique relationship that's come a long way.
And we're very proud of our relationship with Tawasin First Nations and the part that we have done for reconciliation in relation to our dedicated resources on Tawasin. And I think it's a great team, and that's due to officers like yourself who really make the partnership work. So thank you for your work there. Now, Josh, I want to bring you back to the date of the shooting, way back to January of 2019, and tell me a little bit about what your role was and what was happening on that particular day.
Well, at that time, I was with the Metro Vancouver Transit Police. I was on we had kind of an east and a west squad. I was on the east squad, and I'd been assigned as part of the warrant enforcement team that day. And it was the first day of the warrant enforcement team. And the idea was going to be that we were going to do a lot of proactive policing and search for people who had criminal warrants or who might be committing breaches of their conditions. So January 30th, 45 minutes into shift, we had checked one guy, me and my partner, and he'd actually committed just a minor breach of an order, and we used our discernment and decided not to breach him, which I guess was mistake number one of that day, because I might have changed the course of history for me. But I was chatting with my partner in the parking lot of Scott Road in our car, and we were a plainclothes unit. So I was wearing just kind of a winter jacket. And we weren't super undercover, though. If you're aware of plainclothes police officers, you definitely would have spotted us. And so I'm talking to my partner, and I see a male across the parking lot just staring back at me. And I knew right away, this guy knows that we're the police. His behavior after that was, all I can describe is just so suspicious. He turned and he started walking away from us really briskly, and he kept looking over his shoulder to see if we were going to follow him. And so I was rightly obliged to want to follow him, just as a honestly just curious at that point, but also very suspicious myself. So we go around to where we expect him to be, see him in a full sprint running towards Scott Road Station. At this point, we don't have an offense that's occurred. So we keep an eye on him, and I see him push through a fare gate, which is then a provincial offense. So now we have grounds to stop him. Given all of his behavior, I was convinced that there was going to be something more to this incident than just not wanting to speak to police or just the fare gate offense. But we ran up to the top of the platform, and I could see him in a group of people sitting on a bench, quickly trying to remove the hoodie that he was wearing, trying to conceal perhaps his identity, because he knew that I'd seen him earlier. I walk up to him, and I'm about perhaps 15 feet away or so, and he stands up from the crowd, and he pulls a handgun out from behind his back, points it at me, and starts firing rounds. And it's happened quite quickly. It was quite surprising. My reaction was to basically, you just kind of, for a half second, you freeze and you go, oh my goodness. And so my hands came up, and that's where I took the bullets. Was one through my left hand, which splintered and came out my palm and wrist, and then another one which embedded in my forearm.
You know what? I'll jump in there, and I know that we do have a piece of video that we'll be sharing at the same time here, so everyone will be able to actually see the video from that actual event as well. So once you're hit, what happens, Josh?
In that moment, like I said, he'd been standing in a group of people, completely innocent bystanders waiting to catch a train. And so it wasn't an option to just pull out my firearm and return fire right away. He and I were both fully out in the open. So had I done that, I might have been able to stop him as a threat, but I likely would have taken further rounds myself. And I probably couldn't have controlled my rounds enough to keep the rest of the public safe. I ducked behind a pony wall that was at the top of an escalator, and at this point, it's full on chaos for I think in reality about 5 seconds, but to me felt it did really feel like time just stopped. And there was definitely this feeling of chaos that I've never had in my life before or since. In those first few seconds, I gained my wits. I guess I, at some point, pulled my gun out. I have no recollection of that. But I see my partner at the top of the stairs pointing his gun down the escalator. And so I infer that our guy is there. And so I pop over the pony wall, and I see him running down the up escalator. And he's flying. And so I didn't know at this point, but my right arm was broken. And my left hand, I did feel that right away. It was a pretty all-consuming pain. But at the same time, it was this big, huge adrenaline dump moment. And so I reach over the banister or the pony wall, and I deliver a series of rounds down at him. I could tell right away from the angle that I just missed him. And I knew right away based on his reaction that I hadn't hit him. In that moment, the actual feelings that I was feeling, once I came out of that first few seconds of absolute chaos was, we're going to get this guy. He's not getting away. So I turned and started running down a set of stairs to try to re-engage him. And at that point, everything starts to get pretty woozy. and I can feel I'm having a hard time hanging on to my gun because my hand is my whole arm is covered in blood, and it's actually slippery. And of course, my arm was broken, which I hadn't really sensed yet. But I was having a hard time holding onto my gun, and my vision kind of started to close in on me a bit. So at that point, I decided I can't re-engage this guy right now. I need to get to a place of safety.
So I know after that there is chaos and the subject ends up getting away. But in saying that, you end up at the Royal Columbian Hospital, and tell us about sort of what kind of injuries you had received.
So they were 9mm rounds, and I believe that the first one that struck me went through my hand, because that's the only one that I actually felt at first. And I think that my brain just sent all of the I don't know, all the neurons, all the what is going on over to my hand. And so it entered actually, I guess I could show you now. It entered right here, just at the base of my knuckle, and it continued through my hand, exited out, I guess, my palm right here, and then also my wrist down here. And then the second one went into my arm directly right here and embedded on the ulna bone. And it wasn't until actually a SkyTrain attendant who hunkered down next to me as I was up at the top of the platform after the shooting. He was hanging on to my arm, and I said, like, what are you doing? Like, get out of here. Because I wasn't sure if Dale was going to come back. I wasn't sure if I was going to have to re-engage him again. So I was telling people to just get out. But he said, no, you've been hit in the arm as well. And at that point, I felt everything at that point. So I went to Royal Columbian with one through and through here and a comminuted fracture to this area of my hand, with kind of shrapnel throughout. And then I went with a comminuted fracture to my ulna bone as well.
Now, I know you were off work for a short period of time and then came back to work shortly thereafter in May. What happened with Dayon? Did he end up getting caught?
Yeah. I mean, actually, one of the most kind of emotional parts of this, of everything for me in recalling the incident, is the response from the police community, both that night and in the coming days and months. My wife tells a story where after she got the news and she was coming up the highway to come to the hospital, she saw this just absolute like sea of police lights in the Bridgeview neighborhood while they were looking for him. And it's funny what things do and don't make me emotional about this incident. And it's funny to me, it feels funny, but that is one of the big things for me was the massive response. And so Dayon likely hid somewhere in that neighborhood or had escaped right away, but they focused on that neighborhood that day, and through, I think, different intelligence and invest, they were able to arrest him in Burnaby 4 days later.
Amazing story. And I would encourage anyone to go back to podcast number 20 to be able to listen to the full story. But I know since that time, Josh, you have done an amazing job of showing resilience, grit, perseverance, commitment in your work. And really, that's what we wanted to talk a little bit about today and sort of do a follow-up to that episode we did in number 20. And we've talked a little bit about the details of the shooting, but we know that the criminal justice process works very slowly. And it was 2 years and several months before you actually saw a conviction in court. Tell me about sort of how you dealt with that personally, and sort of how you kept yourself positive and optimistic. And, you know, we're anxious to get back to work. I'd love to hear a little bit about your mental frames.
Sorry, about getting back to work or about the court process first?
Let's talk about getting back to work first and how that was, and then we'll go to the whole process.
Well, pretty well instantly, I wished that I could have been back at work. I think at the time I wanted to prove to people that I was okay. There was definitely a piece of pride in there for me that I wanted to just kind of show everyone that I had grit and I was tough and I could be resilient. I wouldn't encourage anybody to rush back to work, and I do wish that I'd taken more time in the outset. But my mindset directly after the shooting, right up until I returned to work, was that I wanted to get back. I wanted to join the search for Dayon, which I was completely incapable of doing. And I wanted to, my goal initially had been to be able to field train, continue field training, which is what I'd been doing before by the time summer came around. So I did a lot of, there was just a lot of physical healing to be done, particularly with my left hand. After surgery, there was a ton of scar tissue and that I needed to work through with my hand physio. And so it was hours each day of different treatments, just trying to get range of motion back. I had hoped, I've been given a pretty good, I guess, prognosis about getting full recovery in the hand, and that didn't happen. The median nerve was damaged, and so those three fingers there, I can't really feel them. I can use them, but they don't sense touch. And so my mindset was very much, I feel good, let's get back. And this was a bit of a false start for me, because those were my authentic feelings at the time, but I definitely had a lot more processing and healing to do. That was just going to take a lot more time to come to be.
I'd be interested to sort of unpack that just for a second. So certainly you had the physical healing that had to happen. What about mentally?
Well, mentally, I would say I was never hesitant to return to work or to return to, active responses to threats. And that's held true every day since. However, mentally, like I sort of referenced, it took several years, really, before different elements of this kind of sunk in and started to have an impact. And I've been working on a degree at the time of the shooting, and ended up doing projects related to police mental health and to do with PTSD. It's a subject that I've been interested in before the shooting as well. But in my, non-academic, I'll just speaking personally from my experience, I think we as police, if I can generalize as a community, and it is a generalization, but we have this, we like control, and we are professionals who are sent into these out of control situations to bring control to them, and bring, safety, and make a not okay situation more okay. And I know that from speaking to other, people in our department, I'm obviously not going to name them, but people who I know firsthand, when they've been through traumatic incidents, and when they've been through situations where they felt like they had no control, like the chaos that I talked about experiencing, that was a very poignant. Those few seconds, changed my life. When police officers don't feel in control, then they're going to possibly try to find that control in another way. And for me, and for other officers that I know personally, rumination and getting stuck mentally on things is how it manifested for me.
Absolutely. We're going to get to that as well. But were you seeing psychologists at this particular time? Were you seeing someone to be able to assist you through that? Or how were you dealing with some of that?
Well, initially, I did see just a counselor. I saw also a counselor, or I believe a psychologist, through work in order to be cleared to return to work. I was feeling very ready to go early on. In the years, over the years leading up to about 2022, I occasionally saw a counselor, but was generally feeling good. And it was in and around 2022 where things for me just felt suddenly very different, and where, I needed some help in order to be mentally healthier.
And what's interesting about that is that's almost 3 years after the event, you're actually finding that there's more impact than there was immediately after. And that's sort of why we wanted to do this podcast, is talk about how things aren't always immediate. You know, we expect there to be action and then reaction, and it doesn't always happen that way. So let's go to the criminal justice system first and talk a little bit about the court case that went forward, and then we'll talk about sort of what happened in 2022. So the court case, maybe just tell us and bring us up to speed on that.
Sure. The case went to trial in the fall of 2020, and I testified for a number of hours, and I felt that it had gone really well. I knew what my experience had been, what my story was, and I just was given a good opportunity to tell it, and so I really appreciated that element of the court process. That portion of time in fall 2020, actually not long after we had recorded our podcast, was the time where I would have to acknowledge my attitude about the whole situation was at a bit of a low point, and where I didn't have the best attitude. The court process caused me to feel actually quite negative for a short time about everything. There were a few reasons for this, and I wouldn't want to talk about it now for the sake of griping about it now, but I think there could maybe be some value in just discussing what the experience was, because it is just what happened. And so he was charged with attempted murder initially. Eventually it resulted in a conviction, not of attempted murder, but of aggravated assault with a weapon. That distinction, for me, it mattered to me at the time quite a bit, because what it felt like the court was saying was he didn't, attempt to murder you. And I had felt very strongly from having looked at him in the eye before, as he's pulling the trigger, that it had been an attempt murder. And I think there was an element in there that felt like it took away from the legitimacy of my experience.
What's interesting about that is that I think we talked about this, Josh, in our pre-podcast interview, is that often as police officers, we're on the other side of that, and we are dealing with victims who have similar feelings that you have had. And I think this allows you to be a better police officer. You understand the value of empathy and the value of how you can support people through the court process. And of course, that allows you to be a far greater professional police officer. But I want you to sort of go on about what that did to you, sort of your overall wellness, and how it finally, after the court case was done, sort of what happens in 2022, and just walk us through that.
Well, I think that I left the court process. It was never about punishment for Dale and Glasgow. That really didn't actually matter to me at all. It wasn't about needing to. I think I just wanted the truth to be on full display, and of course, it's somewhat subjective to me what might have been what I felt was the truth. But some of I think that the things that led to the decision not to go with attempt murder didn't feel just to me at the time, and so I actually walked out of it with this sense of injustice, something that the judge had focused on as a part of his decision was that Dayon hadn't hit me in vital parts of my body. What we, as many police officers watching this, are going to know is that in a gun battle, with somebody who doesn't even have firearms training, when you point and shoot, you're not able to make those highly aimed shots in a dynamic situation. And Dayon could not make a highly dynamic shot to intentionally shoot me through the hand and through the forearm. And of course, as you'll kind of see in the footage as well, I mean, with my hands going up, the bullets actually were coming toward the vital parts of my body. And um, so that, I think at the time that was hard for me to hear. Um, we'd been told ahead of the trial that they were going to attempt to seek dangerous offender status for Dayon, and it wasn't so much about punishment, but I think that I'd experienced some guilt in a sense um, about in a way not taking care of the threat. And I don't mean, I think I would have had guilt if I'd killed him, but also in a sense I had guilt that I didn't, because I was concerned that I'm actually at the third person that he shot. And a few days before he'd shot me, he had shot somebody else in a marijuana dispensary robbery. He was convicted of that as well. And at the time that he shot me, he was on parole for a manslaughter conviction with a firearm. But unfortunately, because the manslaughter conviction, because it went from second degree to manslaughter, they didn't count it toward the dangerous offender status, and you need 3 firearms convictions, and he formally only has 2. So coming out of that, I needed to change my mindset and regain a sense of what my actual standing within the situation was. And I think for a time when all this attention was on me, and when I felt like, my situation is a significant situation, I think it actually created, in a sense, too much a sense of self-importance, and not I think I could have benefited actually from some more humility, which would have helped me heal faster from feeling a sense of bitterness or resentment initially about that court process.
Those are amazing reflections. And I want to come back to those because really that's what you were starting to feel in 2022 when you talked about starting to reflect on this a little bit deeper and finding yourself needing to reach out for more assistance, is that there's self-reflection, there's self-awareness, there's the reality of the situation that's all coming to bear. And now you're forced to be able to manage it 3 years later. And sort of talk about 2022 and what you did to be able to manage that.
I'll say first and foremost, mental health needs to be addressed by professionals. Mental health, it fluctuates, and I wouldn't say that we always have the best insight into everything that causes mental health problems. And so listening to those around me, listening to my wife and my family, and just having the humility and courage to seek help is really important. I learned so much from accessing mental health resources that was not like I couldn't have helped myself through it. And so first and foremost, that's the point that I would really want to get across is to go and to listen to those around you. My faith, I'm a Christian, and my spiritual faith in God was completely instrumental in my healing. I understand that's not going to be a component in every person's journey. But for me, the sense of resentment that I felt, what was lacking was my need to forgive, and my need to kind of trust that my standing and my place in the whole situation, it wasn't all about me. And when wrong things happen, it's not something that I need to even take personally. And I think that it was actually very easy for me to forgive Dayon Glasgow right at the outset. I even felt empathy toward him, and then, but in the court process, that's where it was harder. And reflecting for me on my belief of being forgiven by Christ, for me, how could I possibly withhold forgiveness from somebody else? And in doing that, and in getting there, I saw huge leaps in my own mental health, being able to let go of a past that felt hurtful, and being able to accept kind of my position with humility, and I feel a lot healthier for that.
There's a number of things there I want to be able to re-summarize. The first thing is that reduce the stigma around being able to access mental health and seeking the help of professionals, because they really do have input and strategies to be able to assist us, and that's so important. The second piece is that everybody experiences their own journey, right, and finds their own way. For yourself, it was your faith and your family that assisted you, and others, it might be something different. But it started with some self-awareness around what you were bringing to the situation. And I think that's a real common theme that we hear from many, many people that come on this podcast, is when they become more aware of themselves, when they understand what they're bringing to the situation, they understand that they do have control of themselves. They don't have control of other things, but they have control of themselves. That it starts to be a progressive journey to resilience and feeling better, and ensuring that they get back to not normal, because you never get back to normal, but getting back to the full potential that you want to be able to achieve. And I know that you had a traffic stop that happened after that as well. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. In January of 2022, and things were already perhaps not going so well for me mentally at the time. But in January of 2022, I had a proactive traffic stop with a recruit who was in day one of his block 2. So brand new first day police officer. And the two of us do this proactive stop. We go up to the driver's seat, and I see a meth pipe with residue in the meth pipe in the center console. And so at the time, the way that the laws were in 2022, we could arrest for possession under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. And so I tell the driver, you're under arrest for, and he says, for what? And I say, for that meth pipe right there. And he says, what meth pipe? And he takes it like this in his hand, he smashes it on the center console. And so at this point, I've arrested him. He's not complying. He's now destroying the evidence of what has just been this new investigation we started. And so I go to physically control him. And in grabbing him, he actually pulled me into the car. And now it's a kind of a full-on fight for getting control to try to get him out and take him into custody. I saw him reaching for what I believed was a tire. There was a tire iron between his center console and the seat. And so he was reaching down for that. And I'm trying to control him, and I'm throwing elbows, and he's wrestling around. And we managed to get him out, me and my partner, and he continues fighting. He struck me and my partner both in the face while flailing his arms. And it's this big takedown. We get him down. I realize while I'm holding him down, and we had called, I called over the radio saying, we're fighting. And that was enough to get a good volume of people down. I could hear the sirens coming as I was holding him down on the ground. And that triggered something for me, because I remember the same feeling of hearing the sirens when I was up on the platform after the shooting. And I think that there was something very emotional in that for me, of a sense of like they're coming to help me. And that's I think that I really didn't like the identity of being considered a victim. I didn't like that. And maybe I haven't still figured that all out, exactly why that bothers me so much. But I heard the sirens coming, and I felt this big pain in my side. And my partner turned to me and he said, did you see him reaching toward the buck knife on his waistband? And in that moment, I was concerned I'd been stabbed because I being in close quarters in the car and seeing him reaching for the tire iron, I knew he was willing to go for weapons and that kind of thing. So so we did a check, but for a minute or two, it wasn't clear if I'd been stabbed. And I think that as well, it was a tough one to go through. And I think especially in light of having been through the shooting already, there were similarities in those two situations that it wasn't very comfortable. But, actually, and I will say, once again, the police response was really encouraging and really amazing. I had multiple people message me that day to see if I was okay. It turns out I'd just torn a series of muscles in my side and just needed a little time to heal, but I was fine. And actually, you reached out that day as well, Chief, and I appreciated that.
You know what? It's funny how little things seem to matter in those kinds of situations and what we remember. I want you to talk a little bit about, Josh, about where you are now and where you've come from say mid 2022 till now, and then we'll going to wrap up with some statements around what you'd like to leave our audience with.
I had some hard times for the last number of years with mental health stuff around some rumination, where you get stuck on thoughts and where sometimes you could think about the same thing almost all day. And in that, I was convinced that I didn't need any help, that there was nothing actually wrong, that I in a sense didn't really know how to explain it, but I wasn't always open to getting help because I didn't think there was a problem. And this is what I've learned about listening to people around you. I did go to a counselor as well as a psychologist, and it made a day and night difference. And I've been feeling much, much healthier for 6 months to a year now. And getting that help made all the difference.
I will say that you are absolutely a huge contributor to our policing program here in Delta. I'm very proud of the work that you're doing and very proud of the work that TFNST is doing for us on Tsawwassen First Nations. And I value greatly your contribution to our organization. So know that, from the perspective of leadership here, that I appreciate the job you're doing.
Oh, well, thanks very much, Chief. Yeah. I wanted to, before I forget, I brought a little show and tell, actually. This is the sweater that I was wearing on the day of the shooting. And so, I don't know if we'll be able to see, but that's the bullet hole that had gone through on the right arm, the 9mm. And then that was the other side there, just with the blood. And then this is just kind of where they had to cut it off me so that they could access it. But
did we at least buy you a new jacket?
Yeah, I think I got reimbursed. Yeah.
That's good. What we'll do is we'll take a picture of that and we'll make sure we put it along with some of the postings that we do for this podcast as well. Make sure that we show that the holes in your jacket there.
Sure.
Is an eerie reminder of that day, right? And it brings up some memories, I'm sure, for you.
Well, I mean, frankly, I think in a way, it's almost like this memento way of being able to move on. And I wouldn't want to shame anybody who experienced a sense of eeriness from something like that. That's a legitimate response. But it hasn't been eerie for me.
That's wonderful. What do you want to leave our audience with here today? What's important for you to leave as a message?
I think that we need to, as a community, be very open to people getting access to mental health resources. I feel confident saying there's nobody on our job who's not in some form impacted mentally by the things that we have to experience as police. Not everyone is going to be shot, but that doesn't make my experience more significant than anybody else's. Everybody is going to respond differently to different things, and I think that we need to create a community where that's really open and really okay. And I think we are trending in the right direction and doing the right things right now. So I would encourage anybody listening to listen to friends and family around you, and to also be yourself, somebody who is open to other people's experiences, listening to them and validating what their experience is. That'll go a long way for people.
Absolutely. Those are good comments, wise comments as well. Let me go here. First of all, thank you for being able to come on again to this episode and being able to be open and honest and be, forthright in relation to how you felt, and the fact that it was 3 years after that you started to feel some significant impacts as a result of the shooting. So I admire your courageousness. I admire the fact that you are humble, and you found yourself through some self-awareness and actually are more aware of how you react to situations and what's best for you. I did want to sort of try to summarize again some of the things you said, because I do think they're so important, is that everyone's journey is different. A lot of times it starts with that recognizing that you are in control of your own feelings. And once you recognize that, you never lose control of that, and it's how you react to your own feelings, you will always be the driver of what needs to get done. So that's always seems to be the first step. In relation to being able to reach out for mental health, certainly I hope we as an organization and certainly as a profession are reducing the stigma around accessing of services. And I encourage everyone to get out a pen and paper and do their own wellness plan. And that wellness plan includes, identifying right now, before you need it, a psychologist, identifying a counselor, identifying a physiotherapist, identifying a dentist, a doctor, a massage therapist, but have that list ready for when you need it, so you don't have to go searching at the time, because often it's in that search that increases the significant amount of stress people feel as a result of an incident. And that was well heeded from Josh. So much appreciated for your time, and certainly your ability to come back on and be able to help us send some messages to those who listen to our podcast. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chief.